Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money Podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money Podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm pleased to be joined today by George Kinder. George is the author of The 3 Domains of Freedom and founder of the Kinder Institute for Life Planning. In this episode, we'll be discussing George's insights on how we change the way we think about money and mindfulness. George, welcome to the Get Ready Money Podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here, Tony. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, excited for the conversation. Let's start off with, who you are. Tell us a little bit about what is your origin story?
Well, you sent a few questions my way before we started this. And that was one of the questions that totally stumped me because I'm kind of a philosopher and I go way back and I can go all the way back to birth. I mean, if you want.
If you want.
But I suspect you're trying to, because the podcast on money, you probably want to talk about that. But is that right? Where do you want me to go?
Really how you got to where you are today. So it's not just about money, because I think for people watching and listening to the show, money is connected to everything. So, your path is about so much more than money.
It is. But I think I'll save the birth story for the next time you interview me and go in that direction because it'll take me in different angles. And I want to make sure we cover what is important for your audience as well. It is an interesting story at some point. I think what maybe your audience, what would be helpful for them to know is that I'm widely known in the financial world. I've trained people from 30 countries and have active programs to deliver financial planning trainings. And so I'm widely known in the field of money. 3 of my books have been on money, but I've written 12 books. So the reason that I've only written 3 on money, I've written 2 on civilization. The latest one is The 3 Domains of Freedom, and that's the one I'm most thrilled about right now. But the truth is, freedom is probably the thing that has played strongest for me from early times. And one of the things that struck me when I was lucky enough, my parents paid my way through college. And they were well enough off to be able to do that. But once I got out of college, I was on my own, man. And I didn't want to work for a living. It's almost embarrassing to say. I couldn't see any job out there that I really wanted to do. What I'd studied economics. I'd started in math. I went through English literature and the arts, the history of art, fine arts. And I wanted to be a painter. I wanted to be a writer. And I'd been moved by people who had thought deeply. I mean, that's what a great education will give you. You'll get introduced to them. I was moved by them, and I wanted to try and do something like that, if it was possible, in the 20th and 21st century. And so, but I had to make a living, right? So I happened to go, I went back to graduate school in accounting because I figured, I started in math and I could use those skills easily. But I didn't even last the full 15 months of that graduate school. I did win the bronze medal on the CPA exam, but I dropped out and just started doing tax returns for a living. And what I figured was I could work part-time doing tax returns, and then I could live my free life. And that really started everything. And I think, Tony, I mean, and your audience is getting a feel. What I'm known for in the industry is helping advisors to deliver their clients and writing books that help consumers live their life of freedom, live the life that means the most to them. And that's what I've been passionate about because at the very beginning, I didn't have it for myself. And then I saw that everybody else coming through my office, they were also struggling. They really didn't want to be doing exactly what they were doing. And I thought, well, this isn't right in a free society. We ought to have more freedom to live the way we want to live. So I developed a system called life planning, and that's one of the elements in um, the three domains of freedom.
Well, that's awesome. Well, you said so much there, and part of the reason why I was so excited to have you on the show is uh, had on the show other guests, and I have colleagues who have gone through the planning techniques, and I think it's really, what you get to is a very different way of thinking about financial planning, and I think it's a more natural way for people to actually engage with the financial planning process. So maybe let's go a little bit deeper on that for our audience. Why are you passionate about financial life planning? Because you mentioned, I can see why you wouldn't be passionate about being a CPA. So what made you passionate about life planning?
Well, what I realized, and it was the school of hard knocks that taught it to me because I got here kicking and screaming in those early days. But I what I saw was that uh, you could deliver people into freedom. That way, and what I came to realize, I mean, I felt that for myself, and I was constantly exploring as a young man, how could I live more with more freedom in my life? And and then as I saw clients come through my office, and they were kind of bummed out by what they were having to do with their life, I, created a methodology to actually deliver people into their dream of freedom. And you might think, well, how could you do that? You can't give me my $1 billion or whatever it is. Well, when you ask people serious questions and when you really listen to who they really want to be, doesn't cost $1 billion, doesn't even often cost $1 million. Um, but and so the things that people want are a life that has more authenticity in it. Sometimes they want to be wildly creative. Sometimes there's a spiritual passion or pursuit. Family is huge, spending more time with the family. The environment is a big one for people, community. So these are things that you can do without a lot of money. And what I learned to do was to design just by listening to someone and asking a few questions, but mostly really listening. Um, I figured how to build a dream of who the client seemed to really want to be. And it takes a good relationship to do that. So I had to learn relationship skills and be good with that. So what excites me, you asked me what makes me really passionate about financial life planning, which is what we call the work that I've done, spearheaded, is that I know that the clients that are being served by advisors are experiencing freedom in their lives and in short order. Usually, right in the first meeting, they begin to go, oh my, this is so different. And they begin to tap into what it is they really want to do and begin to move on it. And then the other piece of this is for the advisor, that the advisors who have done this work, who've gone through the trainings, they're living their dream of freedom. And part of that is to deliver people into it. And they care more about that than they care about the money. And that's one of the things that I love about the work that I ended up doing after kicking and screaming my way into it when I was a very young man.
Well, that is awesome, and I think it's so important, and I can see it. I know one of my colleagues, Prudence Zoo, who's really written some phenomenal things on this about her personal journey, and it's just so inspirational to see how it's changed her perspective on financial planning. And I think for other financial planners, as you say, it connects you with your clients on a whole different level. than you typically do in the in the typical client advisor relationship. So I love the change of paradigm that you're putting forth for people.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, me too.
Yes, and I think it's a passion that has allowed it to grow because, as you've mentioned, you've trained thousands of advisors, and everything. But let's switch it up a little bit because you've switched it up a little bit with some of your more recent books. Your latest book is The Three Domains of Freedom. What inspired you to write that book?
Yeah, great question. And again, you see the theme of freedom here. And by the way, that book is, I don't know if you've seen it or had a chance to look at it. It's a small
Oh,
book,
I did. Yeah.
a thin book. And it's, to me, what I love about it is finally, at last, I put all of my wisdom in here. I think it's a book of wisdom. And it can be read in probably an hour and a half. You can read the whole book. But usually what happens, because, anytime there's stuff that makes you think, you stop and think about it. And so I was really thrilled to be able to kind of do this kind of at the end of my career or whatever it is. I'm actually beginning a whole new movement coming out of the book. But
Awesome.
um, the secret to the book is the three subtitles. So it's the three domains of freedom. And the middle domain is the one you and I have just begun to talk about, which is your life is yours. And all those clients I had, they came in and they were struggling in their life. They thought it was their bosses or their spouses or their kids or their mortgages or their parents or the governments or, they thought it was somebody else's. It wasn't theirs. And so your life is yours is life planning. And I show why that works and how it works in the book. So you have a shorthand version to it there. But that's the second domain of freedom. Even if you get this thrill of living the life that you go, wow, this is really who I wanted to be, which is what that is, that life planning element is. Even if you have that, you still have days where the plumbing explodes or
Hmm.
you're renting and the landlord wants to throw you out. Or they try to bully you into paying more money than is actually rent controlled, whatever. There are those times, or you lose an election that means a lot to you in your country. So there are things that really bum you out, and they come along daily. Really, we have them daily. Well, there's another thing. There's another secret to all this for myself. From the beginning, I was doing something that's now become popular called mindfulness. It's a meditative practice. And I've done it, Tony, I've done it a lot, and I've done it for over 50 years. But what's interesting about it, I mean, most people at first years ago, they thought it was woo-woo and, kind of, I don't know what they thought. But anyway, and now they're kind of going, yeah, I can see, I hear all these studies, all the studies say that you get smarter, you get more energized, or you get more focused, or you get more healthy. I see all that, but it's a lot of work. I've tried it. It's like learning to play the piano and just having thumbs. And
Hmm.
and that's true. It is challenging. But the second domain of freedom, I mean, the first domain of freedom is each moment is yours. And that's an incredible thing. And what you won't read anywhere other than in this book is that that's what mindfulness delivers. Stay at it. The reason that it's difficult is because you're making progress. If you weren't making any progress, it wouldn't be difficult. So that difficulty means that you're moving one step forward each time. But read the book. Each moment is yours. So now we have two. And not only have I practiced for all these years, but I've taught for 35, 40 years. I've taught it for many years. Taught silent retreats and that kind of thing, in addition to all this other stuff. And it's informed a lot of my work because really mindfulness, in addition to mastering the moment, it's about the mastery of the present moment. In addition to that, it teaches us a methodology of listening. What mindfulness or meditation really is a process of listening internally. And I don't mean listening to your thoughts. It's listening to something deeper than thought. Let me just throw that out. It creates emotional intelligence, among other things. So you're going to have a better life with your spouse. He or she will love you for it. So anyway, so that was the second domain. And I'd done it all my life, and I wanted to put them right together in a little book and do the best wisdom I could. Very brief, just really make people excited about it, really interested in it, fascinated by it, intrigued. And then the third one is the one, here in America, we've just gone through a tough time. And some people are celebrating right now, and others are still thinking we're in a pretty tough time. And and so the third addresses that. And the third domain of freedom is civilization is yours. And let me tell you, if you don't have that, if you don't feel that, and there's half of people in America who don't right now, you don't feel totally free. You feel a little bummed out or a little down or a little, dependent on these other forces again. So what I do is I look there. I mean, we all know, everybody knows that civilization, democracy was what told us that, right? You get a vote,
Mhm.
civilization is yours and all that. So civilization is yours is something that we all intuitively know is the right thing. And what I do in the book, in that section, it's a third of a very small book, and one half of that, so 1/6 of the book is talking about how to celebrate civilization. So you really feel the joy of it and feel your freedom in it, even if you're in a tough place. There are things you can celebrate. And in the final bit of it, I actually give a method that I call fiduciary in all things, that or abbreviated to be called FIAT, F-I-A-T, that that I think solves all the problems basically we've been facing.
All
Uh,
right.
it's really pretty incredible. What it does is it requires all corporations, nonprofits, and governments to place the truth, um, democracy, the planet, and humanity, all those values ahead of their own self-interest. It's kind of what you'd assume. Wouldn't you assume that a corporation would place the truth ahead of their own self-interest? I mean, you'd want that anyway. And what I argue is it's time to just make it a law. I mean, it's easy to do. And it's time that we had as a right, as human beings. Those institutions, they're not human beings. They don't breathe. Corporations don't breathe. Even though the Supreme Court has given them certain personal rights. They're not people. And they don't breathe. They're not human. But here's the great thing. We can insist that they be humane. And we should, with all of the powers they have, we should insist that all of our institutions, nonprofits, for-profits, and governments be humane. So that's the civilization. And I just think I think we should live in freedom, man. And it's not, I mean, a little bit, it sounds a little utopian, but the truth is that even if we established all this, we still have problems. Our kids go through things, and we have to deal with that, or we go through a health thing. And I mean, or we don't get quite what we want over here with, what we're doing with our business. So there's still, life still goes on in ways that we make the world better all the time, but we're not kind of fighting around it so much. What's happened over the last 8 years or so. Yeah.
That would be nice. That would be nice. In college, I took a lot of philosophy classes. I could love to go down this with you for probably hours, but I know neither one of us had the time. Probably nobody wants to listen to a 10-hour podcast. Uh, but I think you said a lot of powerful things, but I think one thing in there that whether you're in the money world or not in the money world, it's a listening component. I think that that's a basic disconnect in the financial planning world is that people are not listening to their clients. I did a lot of litigation consulting work. I did a stint with California Department of Insurance on the curriculum board, and I consulted for financial planners. And that's a big disconnect is that a lot of times there are some bad actors out there by any means, but that it comes back to like what you're talking about is listening. The client heard one thing, the advisor thought they said something else. And nobody checks with the client to say, well, is that what you actually heard?
Yeah.
But as you point out, it's so much bigger than that. Is listening is a powerful skill and it's a superpower.
It is, and it's trainable. I mean, that's what we excel at Kinder Institute. We excel at training advisors to listen, and even more, Tony, the way we train, we think the clients should be really running the meetings, and but I don't mean organizing them necessarily, but in the first meeting that we do, it's not unusual for the client to talk 90% of the time. And primarily, we aren't asking questions about retirement and portfolio construction and all that kind of stuff. We're asking them about, what do you want? You know, what do you want money to do for you? Why are you here? And just by listening, really listening well, rather than the client stopping and going on your trajectory of retirement, taxes, whatever it is, portfolio management, by listening really well and listening so that you're in tune emotionally with where they might be struggling or where they're really excited, really love something, and they might try to hide that from you. They might be just vaguely reveal it. But just by going, oh, and drawing attention to it, or oh, just by your manner, and this is where uh, the mindfulness practice delivers empathy and delivers emotional intelligence. Just by that, they reveal who they are. Before you get to the insurance, long before you get to the portfolio construction, you want to know, and your client wants to tell you who they want to be and what they want money to really do for them, what would be really cool or really moving, deeply moving. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's really, as an advisor, all advisors, well, the majority of advisors want to help their clients
Yeah.
succeed. But in order to understand how to help them, as you point out, is you have to listen. And I love that 90%, as I was taught by some very good salespeople, and that's what they said. The best thing you can do is shut up and listen. Um, let your client do as much of the talking as possible. Your client will help you find the solution if you just give them the opportunity, like you talked about, the opportunity to share their story and their goals and their fears and what their challenges are. So that's why I'm such a huge fan of what you're doing, and I'd encourage everybody. There'll be links to all of George's books in the show notes, as there always are, but to check out uh, what you're doing. So, I want to run through what I call the get ready questions. These are the questions that I ask all my guests, just because the answers are so wildly different, even though so many of us have a lot of the same training. The first one is, what basic money concept do you wish people knew?
Well, I think the most important thing is that it is freedom that should be driving the whole money story. And most people don't know that. It's what is your dream of freedom? And to have a heartfelt conversation about that, or to investigate. And as I say, I've written 3 books on it, so you can get it from the books, or there's a free website and that kind of thing. So that's it. That's basically it. It's the most important thing. Know where you're going. Know who you want to be. Yeah, let's go for
I
it.
love that. Know where you're going.
Hurry. Let's not wait till retirement. Let's make it happen in a hurry.
Might as well, right? The best day is today. Um, so what is one habit that people can change when it comes to their money?
So it's interesting. I think when you, the consumer, the client, has a clear and passionate vision for who they want to be and support from their advisor, they can change every habit they got because they know they've got their eyes on the prize. So it's not one habit. It's like, let's go there, and you can change all the habits.
That's awesome. I love that. Rethink it. So the next question is, what money myth are you trying to break?
I think the main money myth that I'm trying to break is now at this point, because I've written the last two books on civilization, is that other powers, whether it's governments or it's corporations or even nonprofits, are controlling our lives, or the billionaires are controlling our lives. And there's a truth to that. There's a truth to that that we need to address as a civilization. But the truth is that we can take it in our own power. And I think the myth is that they can get away with not quite telling the truth. They can get away with, well, maybe polluting the environment a bit. They can get away with undermining democracy, perhaps, because they've got their agenda going on. Truth is, that don't have to happen. And that's what I'm promoting in the book. It's time for all those institutions to be trustworthy rather than using their money in ways that don't deliver the best for all of us. Yeah.
I'm with you as well as, we have to remember that these entities are run by people. So, I'm completely agree with you. These entities are not people in themselves, but they are a collection of people, and this collection of people are making choices.
Right.
And they could make different choices that benefited everyone. I think, and I don't know if you agree, but I think a lot of this is short-term decision making. That people are oftentimes driven by really what's going to happen net, one step rather than what's going to happen 10 steps.
Right. And it's set up that way. The way we allocate capital and the way the only fiduciary obligation of a corporation written into law is to the shareholders. And so that interpretation of the short-termism that you're talking about is we got to get money to the shareholders. We got to get money to the shareholders. And what's really interesting is the corporations from the very beginning, from 150 years ago, are given the power to accumulate huge capital so they can go for their idea. They then have the ability, on top of all that resource, they have the ability to leverage themselves even further with enormous debt. And then recently, we've given them the ability to leverage their communications through media and all the rest even further. So you have these huge organizations that are people, but the people at the top are directing it. It's hierarchy. It's a hierarchy. So what I think is it's time to put into law that just as they get to be incorporated, that they need to make sure that they don't put their own self-concern ahead of the truth or ahead of democracy or ahead of the planet. I mean, doesn't that make sense? So anyway, yeah.
It makes sense then with you 100%, but I think that is so advanced for people to be able to put their own self-interest second that I think that, and that gets back to the advisor conversation, that as an advisor, when you're truly advising a client, is you have no agenda. Um,
Other than delivering the client into their dream of freedom, as far as I'm concerned, anyway, that's my agenda. And that means if a client isn't right in terms of the finances, well, boy, we have a lovely meeting. I try to help them in every way I can to move forward in their life, and then let them go. It doesn't matter. The money doesn't matter. It's them becoming who they really want to be that's most important.
yeah, and in that situation, it may also mean that they're not the best client or the best fit,
Right.
um, as well. And that comes from, what you're saying is backing up about who the clients are and where they want to go, and that will tell them if they're a good fit for you or not. So, George, you've been doing this a little while, like I have. What advice would you give your younger self if you go back in time, knowing what you know now about money?
It's really interesting. I would um, I would simply look at myself and say, "You did good, kid."
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Is so often we're self-critical of, the choices that we've made. And, usually if you went back in time, you'd probably make the same choices again because you'd have the same information and the same Cool. So that's powerful, is being comfortable with the choices that you've made. So, the next question is, what is your favorite number one go-to money resource, whether it's a book, podcast, newsletter, app, website? What is the one that you'd want everybody else to know about?
I was a big reader because I've written 12 books. And I used to have an answer that really fit the question. Um, I don't right now. But I have two answers, I think, Tony, that might help a little bit. One of them is that with one of my books, Life Planning for You, I set up a free consumer website called Life Planning for You. And I think the Wall Street Journal called it one of the best retirement websites in the world. That was a number of years ago, but still, that was a kudo for it. So that would be one thing. But I think the real thing is back to this question of freedom. As my eyes have gotten older and I've gotten older, I don't read quite as much. But I do a lot of the mindfulness practice. What I tell people is that the book I'm reading mostly is the book of myself. And it's not a book that has words or phrases or sentences in it. And that's the amazing thing about this mindfulness practice is that you let go of all the things that you grasp onto. And as a way, you find your way towards something that feels more like who you are. It feels there's more authenticity to it. So if I look for the best money resource, it's finding that authenticity, because if I can find that and there's clarity in that, then whatever money choices there are, I'll be able to make a good decision.
Well, I love that. And I think that's really powerful. Again, getting back to being an advisor, is the advisors who are really in touch with who they are and how they're operating, I think, do the best work for their clients. And on the flip side, if you're a consumer, is that you have to be honest with what your goals are, because if you're not communicating that and not taking that power for yourself, you're going to struggle, with your advisors, and you're not going to connect. So I think that's really
Beautiful.
powerful. So where can people pick up a copy of the book of yourself? No, I'm just kidding.
Get started mindfulness practice. I know it's difficult, but keep going through it and read my book. Maybe it'll help.
Yeah, well, and there will definitely be a link. Is there a mindfulness app or uh,
There
thing
are.
that you subscribe to?
I don't. I mean, I just do it because I've done it. I've done it since, I mean, for more than 50 years, maybe 55 years I've done it. And I've done it a lot. So I just do it. And I do it quite a bit. There are ways of doing it that aren't just sitting there straight and just following your breath and everything. But there are ones called Headspace, I think.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah.
called Insight Timer is another one, and there's a third one that I just can't think of. But they're good. They're worth if you don't have any other way of doing it. But frankly, I'd start with the book.
Fantastic. Yeah, and for everybody watching and listening, as always, there will be links to pick up George's book, The Three Domains of Freedom. So to close out, what is your number one tip on changing the way we think about money?
I hate to be a broken record and to be just about my self-interest, but I would read the Three Domains of Freedom. It has, I mean, I've written other books that have lots of stuff in them, and other people have written lots of books that have lots of details in them. This book has wisdom in it. And if I do say so myself, at 76 years of age, I think I'm entitled. And it will really help you think about money in terms of what your passions are in life, money in terms of, the little incidental daily details that get in the way, and money in relation to civilization, to democracy, and to capitalism, and to the world around us. And I think it's important when we're thinking about money to be aware of all of that. So this book does it. Yeah.
Well, and that's awesome. And I think that is a powerful tip, is to really, and that's the whole purpose of the show, is to change the way you think about money and how it works in relation to everything else. That it's a cog on the wheel. It's not, money doesn't have any power in itself. It's the power that we give to money. Uh,
Yeah.
so Love it. So where can people learn more about you, George? Where are you active? We've talked a little bit about your book, and where can they learn more about the Kinder Institute and the work you're doing?
Yeah. So if you kinderinstitute.com is one, kinderinstitute.com is where you learn about all the trainings we do. At least the public trainings are there, and why and how we do them and where they're being given. And then the for myself, georgekinder.com. And you'll discover that I'm much more wild and crazy than I showed up on Tony's thing. You'll have to call me back because I've got an album on Spotify,
Really?
yeah. I mean, I got lots of stuff. I've got 5 books, 6 books of poetry and photography. I've got a book on meditation, 2 books on civilization. I'm out there, and you'll see a lot of it. You get a lot of it there, and you just pick and choose. And I love to connect with people. So hope some of you will turn up. Yeah.
Definitely. And if you're a fan of poetry, I'll give a shout out to your newsletter. I've subscribed to your newsletter and been enjoying the poetry. So that's it. It's cool and it's different. And I think we need more of the different in the
Yeah.
financial world. We're not,
Yeah.
we're not just one thing. We're
Thank you.
people.
I just want to say one more thing because people talk about we talked about mindfulness. The poetry is about mostly it's about becoming present in nature, in Mother Nature. So that you know how we love walking on the beach or walking through the forest, walking hand in hand with the person we love. Well, Mother Nature is our first teacher of mindfulness. You can't be in nature without feeling the wind and feeling the change in the breeze, feeling the change in temperature. Every moment is alive for you. And that's what I try to bring out in the poetry and the photography. Yeah. Thank you, Tony.
Yes, that's pretty cool. Well, George, thanks for joining us today on the Get Ready Money podcast.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
bye-bye to your audience. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate your time. And as always, thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If you learned something today to change the way you think about money, please be sure to subscribe and to tell a friend. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.